Good morning, everybody. Or as we say in the South, namaste, y'all.
We often get asked how we run restaurants together as a married couple without killing each other. And it's a valid question. It's a good question. Well, we thought that was hard until we tried to write a speech together. So we thought it only appropriate to set the stage up like a debate stage with two podiums. So we're kind of inviting you into a behind-the-scenes glimpse of what our living room has looked like as we went through this process. No, it was a fun, creative challenge. Oh, yeah. But I just want to say thank you, Will, for that sweet, amazing introduction and bringing this incredible community together. What a gift.
You're going to have a wonderful day. Let's get started. I often believe that good ideas, great ideas, often start with a question at the heart of the idea. So the question that I want to ask everybody today is, if you were to ask every single person in your organization, why are you here? What do you think those answers would look like? I'd like to believe that if I was to pose that question, that everybody in our organizations, your organizations, from top to bottom, would all say the same thing, that they're there because of the purpose of the organization. But the reality is that in most organizations, it's a mixed bag of why people are there. I mean, even in large, purpose-driven organizations that are doing important, changing the world kind of work, it's hard to get everybody to show up, buying in, engaged with, and believing in the purpose of that organization. And for businesses that exist just, purely for the sake of being in business, for making a living, it's even harder. So why does this matter? Well, the data from countless studies tells us that when members of an organization buy into a vision, a mission, a sense of purpose, when they believe that what they do matters, well, they're more passionate, engaged, creative, fulfilled, take ownership, and they stay longer. And we don't need studies to tell us this. I mean, we all intuitively know this because it applies to us too. So the question that as our organization grew from a small group of 10 to then many tens to 100 and then to many hundreds was essentially, how do we give our people something to believe in as we get bigger? How do we give everybody that shows up at our organization have a sense of purpose every day at work? And we discovered through this journey that the answer isn't in what you do, but in what you do with what you do. There's a spiritual philosophy in India called mastery in servitude. It's become our ethos, it's become our guide, and it's become the way we've figured out how to grow our business. It's at the heart of everything we do. Mastery in servitude. We believe this philosophy is the key to giving people something to believe in. It's a simple idea. The idea is that success, whether in business, work, life, relationships, parenting, lies in embracing everything you do as an act of service.
We're in the restaurant business, and across the board, our industry can be tumbly and chaotic, razor-thin margins, dismal retention rates, and there's electricity in it. And when we touch that, we get hooked on being in service. But anybody who's been in the hospitality business for the past few years of our world turning upside down understands the complications of giving ourselves and our people something to believe in at work. But more than ever, believing that what we do matters is essential. Because without it, the awesome parts, that electricity, it just hides from us, and we spend our entire day tumbled up in the weeds. And that's what we just all went through in the pandemic. How much did we miss that? So thinking of this idea of doing everything from the perspective of being an act of service, what does that mean when things get hard and our people are burnt out and we disagree and we lose the fun? What happens when we miss that part of our work? And how does this idea, it would be very natural to wonder, how does this idea of mastery and servitude play out across multiple locations with hundreds of employees?
So let's start at the beginning. About 12 years ago, I came across a quote that said that a great company is one that makes the world a better place because it exists. So I grew up in India in a deeply spiritual family, and also I grew up as a Parsi, where we really embrace this idea, this culture of giving back. I mean, well, actually, Parsis feel stressed out when they don't make enough money and guilty when they make too much. So, so this quote really sort of sank its hooks into me. And I really sort of grew up with an idea, a tradition, that if you do well, it's a responsibility to give back. So I couldn't stop thinking about how we could be that kind of company. So after a lot of soul searching, Molly and I and our leadership team that have been with us since day one, we kind of came to the realization that while we had a very clear understanding of what it is that we did, we hadn't quite figured out how to articulate why we did what we did. So it's when I came across a quote, another quote, and this time on the back of a Starbucks card of all places, that we found the language to describe what it is that we wanted to be. We didn't want to be an Indian street food restaurant that served people. We wanted to be a people restaurant that happened to serve Indian street food. So then our purpose became to make the world a better place through food, love, and service. So we adopted this idea of mastery and servitude. It became our ethos. We talked about it, we communicated, we articulated, we even painted it in the door above the kitchen. And a critical piece of recognizing that in order for our team, for everybody else, not just this core leadership group, to become engaged with this vision, what we cared about had to belong to them as well. So we started a little program that we rolled out. It was very small in the beginning. We rolled it out at all of our restaurants. And the idea was that everybody, every individual staff member, from a dishwasher to a host to a GM, could nominate a charity or a purpose or a cause that had meaning to them for our Give Back nights. So essentially, anybody in the organization could submit an idea for giving back or helping out or finding a way to be of service. And the aha moment breakthrough came through was the realization that by doing that, we'd come across something magical. We'd stumbled upon something incredible that was going on. Because while some of our people cared about our vision for Indian food, far more people cared about our restaurants being a vehicle for doing good in the world. Suddenly, a dishwasher who could care less about the regional differences in garam masala from one part of India to the other was rolling up their sleeves and helping participate in a give-back dinner, volunteering with the affordable housing in our community, supporting an orphanage in India, or raising awareness about childhood hunger in Western North Carolina. What we discovered is that all of us, everybody, wants our work to be of significance no matter what the role is. So what we realized was when you set things up in such a way that everyone in your organization is empowered to engage in something of significance, suddenly the day job, the widget you make, the service you provide, the product you sell, it has meaning because it's in service of something far greater than just making a living.
And then that something, having something to believe in, becomes a thing that holds them. That something then develops into a primary organizing principle for the whole team. A clear company ethos. What your business's ethos is matters less than that you have one. You can devote company resources, like Meherwan was talking about, to a particular cause, or it can play out internally on a micro level with your team, how you run your business. But the important thing is how you weave the mindset of the ethos through every single part of the business. Learning how to manifest these lofty ideas into the day-to-day, fast-paced swirl of this restaurant business that we're in, that's the challenge. What we've learned is that it all comes down to how we teach our teachers. Everyone in a position of leadership in our businesses from restaurant shift leaders to corporate level executives. They need to understand the mission and their role in it. The importance of this idea was really brought home to me recently. So a few months ago, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. Don't worry, this is a good news story. Her prognosis is really good. But on my mom's first day of chemo, she was really nervous. We both were. We entered this communal room of people sitting in a big circle in Barca loungers, hooked up to IVs, looking sick and exhausted. And it's surreal. So as my mom's getting settled into her Barca lounger to get hooked up to receive these toxic chemicals for the first time, the nurse comes over to help her get settled and sees the look on my mom's face, and she offers her a warm blanket. Now, this was August in Charleston, South Carolina, where it was about 1,000 degrees outside. The kind of like sticky summer heat that you just get drenched in sweat just walking from the car into the hospital. There was no need for a warm blanket. But this prone nurse knew what the gesture was really about. The gesture was saying, I've got you. This is hard, but you will get through it. Without saying anything at all, without using any words, the offering said everything that my mother needed to hear. It said, it's okay to be afraid. These little comforts will help you keep moving through that fear. So my powerful, independent, ex-restaurateur mother, she allowed herself a much-needed deep breath. That warm blanket helped her to trust the entire process and the nurses. So I'm not sharing this story with you today because it's a sweet example of how these simple gestures can ripple out to change someone's entire experience. I'm sharing it with you to confess that while I'm sitting there with my mother, trying to be fully present with her, my restaurateur brain that never stops working was wondering, what motivated that nurse to prioritize the warm blanket over everything else that she had to do in that moment? And ultimately, I was stuck thinking over and over again about what it really said. What if someone, her trainer maybe, taught her that the warm blanket was actually the most important thing that she would do every day?
So the challenge that we had to solve for was, if this mastery and servitude was going to be our company ethos, how do we manifest it in the daily grind of the restaurants? After a lot of trial and error, and wonderful stories like this, we figured it out by teaching our leaders to ask a very simple question. Where does the love lie in this situation? It's a thought experiment that helps us focus on what matters most. It puts the notion of care at the top of our mindsets and prioritizes it through all the decision making. I mean, as we all know, running a business of any kind comes with piles of hard decisions, and learning how to navigate those decisions is sort of part of the job. It's part of how we hone our craft. So while we're in that process, if we just simply weave through it always this question, where does the love lie? Then we're inserting a connection to something bigger than the task that is at hand. It's a way of thinking, how do I accomplish this business decision objective before me, while also focusing on what would best serve this person or the situation at hand? We've learned to use this practice as a process to guide us to pretty much the toughest times, including the ones that we just went through.
So last year, we were faced with the challenge of having to close one of our restaurants. Our executive team had gathered around the conference table, and we're looking at this long list on a whiteboard staring down at us, the list of all the really difficult things that we needed to do to shut the restaurant down. And the air was heavy with the weight of it, and we were visibly all sitting there with pits in our tummies, wrangling our way through this list. The stressful part about it was that individually, we were each in our own way internalizing our fear about how our staff was going to feel, wondering if they were going to feel let down by us. And this team of executives, they built this business with us. They're the biggest hearted people that I know. So it was stressful. And personally, I am completely allergic to sitting through meetings in that state. So I paused the process and I asked the question, where on this list is care of our people? And Meherwan looked at me perplexed and maybe a little aggravated. I was pausing the process. And he said, well, we have to ask ourselves that question about every single one of the items on this list. He had assumed that it was a given. But just naming it, him saying it out loud to our team, allowed us to all collectively relax. And so we wrote on the top of the list in bold letters, find the love, to apply to every bullet point on that list. And that gave us the structure that we needed to make sure that we thought about every single task that we had to do through the lens of how to best take care of our team. So like bullet point number 1 about fix the timeline for closing became find the time frame that will best take care of that team and then fix the closing timeline around that. Bullet point number 2 shifted from figure out how to tell the team that we're closing to find as many opportunities within your business for growth and then begin conversations with them. The experience of that meeting totally shifted because collectively we trusted that we would find the way to do this really hard thing that we had to do, close the restaurant, while also taking great care of our people. And we did. But it's easy to misunderstand this concept of finding the love, to think that it's just about being nice all the time. But sometimes real love lies in finding the courage to say the hardest parts, sharing our truth, like giving the employee the feedback that they really need instead of hoping that they just magically get better at their job, which we've all done. We've all been there. But practicing the art of that, how to apply it in the business space, is at the heart of how we infiltrate this lofty idea of mastery and servitude into the day-to-day mix of life in the restaurants. That practice then becomes contagious. And that is how we carry it forward. And we change the world through the simplest of actions. That is our job in the hospitality industry. That is our job. These small gestures of care, the warm blankets, they provide the moments of grace that sustain us. They function like oxygen. They give us what we need to get through life. And I believe in these wobbly times that we're living in, this is how humanity finds itself and holds on to itself.
So this ethos of mastery and servitude ended up teaching us 3 things. First, when you empower your people to engage in something that's of significance to them, suddenly their job has meaning. When the offering of a warm blanket becomes the most important part of the job, then that's when you've provided a moment of grace through service. And when our leaders go about their daily interactions and decisions by looking first through the lens of the ethos, they become then culture carriers for what we hold the most sacred. So we did ask our team last year, why are you here? it was a pretty scary and vulnerable time to ask that question. I mean, the pandemic had chewed us up and spit us out. We did not know if our ethos had survived intact. So we sent a survey to our entire team that they could answer anonymously. Of the hundreds and hundreds of responses we received, this is a word cloud from what they said. Food, people, love, make world good. I think our ethos is well in life.
Yeah. So out of the hundreds of responses that we got, only a couple of them were about the paycheck. This is how the messy human condition finds where the love lies. We really wanted to read all of them to you because they were so wonderful, but we're just going to do a highlight reel of some of our favorites and a couple funny ones.
My why in life and in work is just doing enough to make a positive impression on someone, no matter how significant. When I know someone was positively impacted by my words or actions, I know it makes them that much more likely to pay it forward to someone else.
Because serving my community is far more interesting than only serving myself.
I want to create a healthy world where people love each other and see one another as equals.
I want to make a living being inspired by what I do.
My why is my son, and to spread all the light, love, and positivity I can in this world, to show my son how to be a caring, loving, strong human.
My why is serving food I can stand behind, food that embodies integrity and authenticity.
A fried chicken sandwich saved my life.
That's a good one. Because my cat has diabetes.
To make people feel at home.
The belief that being in service of other human beings is the best way to make the world a better place. So what this demonstrates is that when you build a business around an ethos that gives people something to believe in, you attract the kind of people looking for just that.
And this effort to align our business with acts of service, it's not about being good people, or it's not about getting brownie points to stockpile karmic credits, although that probably doesn't hurt. And it's not about trying to prove to ourselves or to anybody else that we are worthy. It's simply about giving all of us something to believe in. So Mastering Servitude is our ethos, it's our business's North Star, and it teaches us that mastering the art of being in service to others ultimately teaches us how to master ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.